Rev up your engines!
Well, Stellantis has a car-sharing business now. Rent their car by the hour. And they're planning on growing by 40%, and they're starting to hire people for the business. It's called Free to Move, the number 2. Free, number 2, move. Now, they're adding 100 people to their 250 people worldwide setup, so they got a long way to go. Now, it's very open-ended. You can rent them by the hour, or you can rent them by the month. But it basically comes down to is they're having a heck of a time selling their vehicles, so maybe they can rent them out to people one at a time. Every time a car company comes out with stuff like that, last-ditch attempt to go to the bottom of the barrel and try to get their cars in people's hands somehow. Now, in the United States, this Free to Move already exists. And here, they're monthly subscriptions. San Francisco, San Diego, San Jose, and Sacramento. All in California, interestingly enough. But it's also available in Washington, D.C. and Portland, Oregon. Kind of an odd mix of where they're having them. Now, they claim that Free to Move has 2 million members across 170 countries with 2,400 shared vehicles and 420,000 vehicles for use. The shared ones are the ones you can rent by the minute or month or whatever, right? The thing is, I don't believe any of these figures myself because a lot of these rideshare companies, hey, they're just lying through their teeth to try to get it out there how great they're doing. All I know is they had one in Nashville, another company, it's gone. It doesn't make much sense for a company to build a bunch of cars and then rent them by the hour or by the day or by the week. Most of the time they won't be rented. And then, of course, everybody knows what happens when you rent a car short term. You generally beat the heck out of it. So what do they do with them when they're not renting them out anymore? Who's going to buy these things? They'll probably be falling apart. And of course, the company itself is trying to hire people. So listen to their doublespeak. You couldn't have made this up. Free to Move offers everyone a chance to use their energy and expertise in a dynamic, agile, multicultural, and international company. Nonsensical words all tied in together to make everything look like we're all happy together on this planet. Oh, and we'll rent you cars. Everyone will be smiling. It'll be a multicultural, international experience. Boy, I don't know. This PC stuff is starting to get to me. I can't believe the nonsense that comes out of people's mouths with this stuff. And this is all basically to rent you a Stellantis product. Because they have a hard time selling them. Let's rent them instead. We got to get rid of these things somehow. Fern says, Scotty, is it a good idea to upgrade my suspension, wheels, and tires with a 2 to 3 inch lift? I want to fit 33-inch tires. I got 06 double cab Tundra, 95,000 miles. No, it's a really stupid idea. Those things were well-made trucks. They were trucks made to pull stuff, to pull themselves, to put stuff in the bed, to carry trailers with an awful lot of weight. Guy down the street has one. He got an 04. One time he towed 30,000 pounds with it. Now he was only going 30 miles an hour. He didn't take it on the highway. But it's amazing what those things can actually tow. You start changing the wheels and tires and lifting it, you're ruining the design. Toyota engineers know what they're doing. They designed it the way it is. Those trucks are pretty high up in the air anyway. You don't want to waste your time doing it. They're not going to ride right unless you really lift it. Then when you tow stuff, it's going to sit even worse. No, it's not a good idea. I wouldn't do it. It's dumb. It's a very good designed vehicle. Don't ruin it because you want it to look a certain way. It's a truck. It's made for use as a truck. Now, I mean, if you want a lawn ornament, go ahead and do whatever you want. But if you're using it as a regular truck, it's dumb. Serial says, Scotty, what would be a good place to learn about working on carbureted engines? I know the basics, but I want to get good at diagnosing. Yeah, well, that's old technology. That said, it's a much simpler technology. There's plenty of books out there on carburetors, whatever you want, Weber carburetors, Rochester carburetors, Edelbrock carburetors. They're so much simpler in design and practice. The only real hassle with them is when you get into like the quadrajets, the 4-barrel carburetors, when you take them apart, there's 4 of everything. And when you take them apart, springs and things are going to fly all over the place, and you're going to be overwhelmed by the nonsense that's going to come out of it. You want to learn on carburetors? Get one of those old Volkswagen carburetors that were only 1 barrel, or an old Ford. My grandson's friend's got a F100 Ford. It's got a 1-barrel carburetor on it. Very simple to work on. Start with the simple stuff and work your way up if you want to learn. So that's more simple than modern cars, I'll tell you that, with a fuel injection. Make your head spin. William Todd Rodriguez says, Scotty, I'm going to go on a diet. If I lose 50 pounds, will that get me better gas mileage? I'm going on a long road trip. It'll get you better gas mileage. More probably better gas mileage for you. You won't have as much gas. You won't have as much indigestion if you get in better shape, right? Because 50 pounds on a vehicle that weighs, 2 tons is a spit in the bucket. Now, you may be able to run faster and get more miles per gallon of the food you eat, but it's not really going to affect the driving of the car one iota. 50 pounds out of 2 tons isn't going to do jack on a car. But you'll feel a lot better, you know. FNU says, after how many miles do we need to change the tranny fluid for RAV4 2013? I do it every 50,000 miles or so, and I'd only use Toyota fluid, because understand one thing. You drain the fluid out of that. You only get a few quarts coming out. Most of it's still in the torque converter and inside the transmission. You're not going to take all that apart and flush it out. That's a pain in the butt. If you do it every 50,000 miles or so, that's good enough. Toyota makes good fluid. Buy the Toyota OEM fluid. It's not that expensive, even at the dealer, and you can buy it other places. And then just do it regularly, and you won't probably have any problems. Learn how to do it yourself, because you can't trust people. My old mechanic in Houston, he paid a guy to change the fluid in his Toyota. The guy screwed it up, and next year his tranny went out, and it cost him $5,500 to have a used one installed. So do it yourself, do it right. Don't trust clowns that don't know what they're doing. Arson says, Scotty, I'm from Albania. Hilariously enough, I had an Albanian come visit me when I was in Rhode Island. He moved to the United States. You're a nice guy. What car do you recommend for me to buy to be comfortable for my family? I'd like to know your opinion. I'm assuming you're still in Albania. You got different cars there and different rules, different mechanics that know how to work on different cars. From my experience of people in Albania, a lot of them buy Volkswagens. The parts are available. They're not that expensive. And luckily enough, for you people in Albania, the Volkswagens that you guys are getting are Volkswagens made in Deutschland, made in Germany, not Volkswagens made in Mexico or some other place where the quality control isn't as good. So a lot of people there do buy Volkswagens. I'm not a Volkswagen fan in the United States. Most of the ones here are made someplace else. A lot of plastic, cheap stuff in them. But Eastern Europe, a lot of them drive Volkswagens. They can get parts. They said they get them used cheap, and they're happy with them. Mohammed said, I'm thinking about buying a clean LS 400 or 430. Thoughts? Anything to look for? Which you'd prefer, the 400 or the 430? Okay, first I'd go for the 400. When they changed to the 430 engine, they made a lot of mistakes. They had a lot of engine problems as they aged. I had here one the other day, and I had another guy the same day bring me a 400. He was the original owner of a 99. The engine had 230. It was still running fine, and there was nothing wrong with it. Now, it did have a timing belt instead of a timing chain because it was an older one. I would definitely go 400 over to 430. Though personally, myself, I'd stick with the 300 series Lexuses because I like their V6s better. They're cheaper to maintain. The parts cost less. They get better gas mileage, and the V8s are a lot harder to work on. Most of those V8s, you got to take the whole top of the engine off to change the starter. Not so on the 6s. It's a lot of stuff that I would rather get a 6-cylinder Lexus than a V8. FNU says, change my transmission fluid by myself? Don't I have to take it to a transmission specialist? No, you can watch my videos. A lot of that stuff, they have sneaky things. Oh, they took the dipsticks away, so you don't know, blah, blah, blah. Ways on most of them where you can drain the fluid out, measure how much comes out, get new fluid, pump the same exact amount of fluid back into your engine. It can be that simple. You can easily do it yourself on most cars. You go to mechanics, a lot of them, they screw up the job, and then away it goes. You read how to do it, watch a YouTube video, do it exactly the same, drain it out, measure it, put the same amount back in. You know it was done right. Plus, you know you're using the right fluid. Always use the OEM factory fluid, right? A lot of these tranny shops, they just have bulk fluid lying around, big 50-gallon containers. They'll throw in whatever the heck they got around, and they'll say, oh yeah, we put the OEM in. How do you know if they did it or not? I've seen it where they didn't and they said they did. Obi says, can you have a drivetrain issue because the battery is low on a BMW? Well, you can in modern cars, any modern car, because everything is run by computer. The engine, the transmission. You know, back in the day, diesels had mechanical fuel injection systems. That wasn't the case, but that's a long time ago. They all have electronic fuel injections and electronic controls. If you do not have a minimum supply of battery voltage and amperage to your system, you can have all kinds of drivetrain problems. The engine might not run right. The transmission might not shift right. Even I, though, got to force myself into it because you think, oh, how could that have to do with it? Whenever I get a car and somebody says, I got a real funky problem, the first thing I do now is I get my battery tester out, hook it up. And if it says the battery's bad, I tell them, you're going to have to put a battery in first. Because otherwise, we're kind of peeing in the wind. We could be working on things that there's nothing wrong with them, but they're not getting enough voltage from the battery, so then it has a code for that sensor when there's nothing wrong with the sensor. I just did one with a guy's car today. He had a code, was electronic power steering, right? I had a code, and I look it up, and it's a code for loss of voltage. Well, I checked the battery was no good. Replaced the battery, the code went away. He might have spent a fortune if somebody put an electronic power steering pump on the car when all it was a weak battery. So, yes, it can. Well, Ford has just patented another new tailgate design. You might call it Tailgate Wars. They're having a tailgate that actually comes down like a normal tailgate, but it can also go sideways so you can get in easier. You know, when you put the tailgate down, you got to reach in. It's harder. The tailgate's in the way, so if it opens sideways too, you don't want to have one that just works one way or the other because then you're compromising. It's kind of the best of both worlds. So you get a tailgate that can flop back, but also can come out sideways like a door. Now, Ram has one that opens like a barn door like that from the middle. This one actually will be a sideways one, like a regular car door. And they're still using those Ford assist systems. You can hold on to them and climb in. So got some interesting ideas with the tailgates. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.